I want to look at a few things today. The main one probably is going to be the excess deaths in young people in the United States. The official data is showing a cumulative total of around about 17,000 excess deaths in 0 years to 24-year-olds in the United States. The excess deaths in young people are much lower than the excess deaths in older people, but still it means that more people are dying than we would expect. Now, this is the graphic here for the 0 to 24-year-old age range in the States, and again, rather poor that they don't differentiate it more. But this line here is 18,000. That's 18,000 there, and we can see that cumulatively the line has risen until we're around about the 17,000 mark. So here we see the graphic here. You might be able to see it more clearly. So here's the numbers here for the excess deaths. That scale in thousands. Low up until, well, when did it start going up? Really, May, June, September 2020. Some of those, of course, will be COVID related. Thankfully, very few people in this age group have died from COVID, but there are some. But it carries on increasing, as we see here. Now, the projected line here, quite how they get this going down, I don't know, because it's cumulative, but we are seeing quite a high cumulative numbers of excess deaths in the 0 to 24-year-old age group in the United States, about 17,000 for the country. Now, these are statistics, of course. Now, I wouldn't normally do this, but this tragic young death is in the public domain, so I felt it was acceptable to do this as an example. It is in lots of news outlets. That's the reason I'm doing it. It's already public domain material. And of course, we give our deepest condolences to Gwen and her family. A 17-year-old died peacefully in her sleep in June. This is just awful. So sorry. After eating dinner with her parents and then going out with friends for a few hours. And the reason this is so well known in the States is Congressman's daughter, Sean Caston, who obviously I'd never heard of, but is well known in the States. And as I say, in lots of public domain outlets. So I just kind of wanted to take it away from the statistics to the individual tragedies, of which there appears to have been 17,000. Father's party statement: she'd just come home from an evening with friends, went to bed and didn't wake up. And the Castons themselves are saying, this past June, our daughter Gwen Caston died of a sudden cardiac arrhythmia. So it looks like the same thing that that Tim died of in the UK. Tim Goch, the radio DJ who died at work yesterday. Tragic for individuals. In layman's terms, the family say she was fine and then her heart stopped. Healthy 2022 teenager. So she'd been previously healthy. She was fully vaccinated against COVID. Had tested positive for COVID-19 more than once in recent months, but never experienced any symptoms. And by all accounts, a much loved daughter. Absolutely tragic. So when we look at a graph like this, and we say numbers like cumulative deaths are well over 16,000, 17,000. We have to put that in the context of the tragedy for individual families. Just want to look at some UK data briefly here. Now this is by age group, and again this is the 0 to 24 age group. Now, why the government are using 0 to 24 years, I mean, that's a pretty big chunk of age ranges. I would have much preferred to see this broken down into, well, ideally, but by the year, or certainly by the 5-year block. But why they're doing that so crudely? We would like to see much more finesse in the data. But Anyway, so we've seen that excess deaths have been lower. So this is July 2021 here. And we see that basically the excess deaths are these on the top line. So we're seeing kind of more excess deaths here than we are reductions beneath here. So this is a trend towards increased excess deaths in the 0 to 24-year-old age group in the UK. Now this line here, that line there is 20 per week, excess deaths per week. So we can see that some deaths, some weeks there's 5, 20 or even 30 excess deaths per week in this age group. Now, some of these could be COVID related, others will not be COVID related. I suspect the majority are not directly COVID infection related. And we really need a massive national inquiry into this. We need to know what's going on here. We've flagged this up many times on this channel. Mainstream media just not seem to be picking this up. But I find it personally quite alarming. Now, excess deaths continue to be very concerning. We don't see the response in the press that we saw in the early stages of the pandemic. We don't see the Prime Minister and the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Officer standing shoulder by shoulder telling us about it. So that's why I want to do that now. Now, this is going to be a fairly data-intense video, so let's just dive straight into it because we don't want to be alarmist. We simply want to give the data. Now, this first data set here is from the Office for National Statistics equivalent in Australia Bureau of Statistics. So in 2022, there were 111,000 deaths that occurred by the 30th of July, registered by the 30th of September, but this is the key point, 16,375 above what we would expect, 17.3% higher than we would expect. So we're seeing a great increase in excess deaths in Australia, as we are in other countries. The Bureau doesn't particularly explain this, it just says they exist. We might be looking at some explanations later, but we do need a free, full and open public debate on this. What is going on with these excess deaths? Back to Australia. In July, there were 17,936 deaths. Okay, people do die, we know this. But that's 2,503, 16.2% above the historical average. These are significant increases above the historical average. This is many more deaths than we would be expecting. And it is a concern, and especially concerning is the official silence on this. Why aren't people talking about this much more? Why is it left to people like me on YouTube really to be the main people that are flagging this up? Pretty disappointing, really. Now, let's move on. So this is the Australian data. There were 322.5 fewer deaths due to COVID. In other words, this is not attributable to COVID. There's something else going on here that's not COVID related. British Heart Foundation, we've looked at this before. British Heart Foundation are saying extreme heart care disruption linked to 30,000 deaths involving heart disease. So pretty high numbers. Now, here, the British Heart Foundation is attributing this cause to delay in care and difficulty accessing care. That's undoubtedly part of it, but I think we do need to look for additional causes of increased heart disease as well as simply lack of access to services. It is part of it for sure, but are there other factors going on? Should we just say it's all this and not be looking for other factors? Well, I feel we should be looking for other factors that are contributing towards this increase in excess deaths that we are seeing, because it is very significant. Anyway, there's the links there. Since the pandemic began, over 30,000 excess deaths involving heart disease. And increasing all the time, of course. 230 additional deaths a week average over the pandemic. But it does seem to be increasing, as we'll be looking at in a minute. Heart disease is amongst the most prominent diseases involved in the high number of excess deaths since the start of the pandemic, as we know. And we have done specific videos on this in the past. While COVID-19 was likely a significant factor, these are direct quotes from the British Heart Foundation, COVID infections are no longer a driving force. In other words, they are clearly saying that this is not caused by COVID infection. per se anymore. They're attributing it mostly to difficulty in accessing services. I'm just asking the question, is there additional causes as well as that?
Good Morning America is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch sponsored by Pfizer.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
This weather report brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press Data Download brought to you by Pfizer.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
Let me hear if you have the Pfizer vaccine. Let me hear it from Moderna. AstraZeneca.
Get vaccinated. It's incredibly effective, but the truth is, not enough people are getting it. We've got to change that so we can all have a safe and healthy holiday season.
Not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science. It's time to start shaming them.
If you refuse to be vaccinated, you shouldn't get the same rights as people who've been vaccinated.
If you're willing to walk among us unvaccinated, you are an enemy.
That choice doesn't seem so tough to me. Vaccinated person having a heart attack, yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo, rest in peace, Wheezy.
Baby walking around with your head cut off. Baby walking around with your head cut off. Baby walking around with your head cut off.